Hello economics students, you made it to the end of microeconomics. This is our last video, and what we're looking at is an example of government intervention which unintentionally decreases one type of efficiency. Now what we sort of alluded to this in the last group of videos where we looked at government interventions, and I certainly will have in class, because despite their best efforts and despite them having good intentions, I would argue that every single time the government intervenes in a market, there will be an unintended consequence. So remember that if you are to put a tax on a particular good or service, let's call it a tax on smoking, right? Your intention, the government's intention, is to move resources away from that particular market, to decrease the consumption of cigarettes. That's the intended consequence. However, the sort of law of unintended consequences is that there will always be another unintended consequence, something else that will happen as a result of that intervention. Now, your job is just to know one example of government intervention and to be able to explain how that intervention unintentionally decreases one type of efficiency. Now, just to be clear, you don't need to be able to argue that the intervention in net terms is negative to efficiency. So once we account for the benefits to efficiency and the negative to efficiency, so the intended consequences minus the unintended consequences, you don't need to do that. All you need to be able to do is think about one unintended consequence of the intervention and how it decreases efficiency. So let's look at some examples. One that's particularly near and dear to my heart, which is the Alco Pop tax. And the Alco Pop tax was introduced actually quite a while ago. And if you've ever wondered why, these sugary pre-mixed drinking options in Australia are quite expensive relative to perhaps other drinking options, it's because there is a special tax on them. It's called an Alco Pop tax. It was introduced by Kevin Rudd, maybe 2006. Now, the intended consequence, we can have a look over here. The intended consequence, if you put an excise tax on Alco Pops, is, again, to shift the supply curve to the left, because firms have to pay that extra cost of production. It's going to increase the cost of these UDLs. I don't know what they are now. It's been a long time since I've drunk one, but maybe like $6. It's going to increase the cost from, say, $4 to $6. And therefore, because of the law of demand, there'll be a decrease in the quantity traded. There'll be less people purchasing UDLs and, like Smirnoff Double Blacks or whatever they've got now, okay? So it's a tax on these pre-mixed options. However, remember the law of demand. Remember the law of demand says that as prices increase, there'll be a decrease in quantity demanded because consumers are smart. They're rational individuals. When you and your friends are standing there trying to think about what you're going to buy, maybe, obviously when you're 18, you substitute. Remember the substitution effect. You substitute to something that satisfies the same need or want. Now, I don't imagine you're drinking these vodka UDLs because they're, an acquired taste. You're drinking them for probably one reason, right? So you will substitute to some other product that will satisfy that same need or want in you. Okay? And what ends up happening is the consumers substitute to more high content alcohol, right? You're smart, you buy a bottle of vodka instead of buying a pre-mixed option, and you buy some lemon, lime and soda and you mix them yourself. Now, the intended consequence was to reduce consumption of alcohol. What actually ends up happening is you consume more alcohol because you're buying a full bottle of vodka. Okay? So the unintended consequence is that you end up consuming more. And we can make links to allocative efficiency. It's obviously bad for society's needs and wants. Alcohol consumption has negative externalities. It's also bad for productive efficiency and to temporal efficiency. Okay, that's the unintended consequence. Secondly is this JobKeeper payment, which was introduced by this man, RIP, Josh Frydenberg, who used to be our treasurer. It was $750 per week. It paid employers to pay their employees. It ended up costing the government $100 billion. Lots of private schools even got access to this payment. Now, the intended consequence of this payment was to make sure that businesses could stay in business and they could get access to, they could maintain the relationships with their staff, right? So basically the government was subsidizing workers' wages to the tune of $750. They were paying employers to pay their employees. The intended consequence was to keep them employed. However, businesses, again, are rational. They're profit maximizers. That's my doorbell. And what ends up happening is that they manipulate their activities to get access to this payment. So I think you had to prove that you had like a 30% decrease in revenue in order to get access to this payment. So businesses just slow down production. If you're a cafe, you didn't open as many days. If you're a restaurant, you didn't open as many days. You also kept lots of people on your books that perhaps you didn't need, okay? So that's a decrease in productive efficiency. So on one hand, the intended consequence might have been good, but the unintended consequence actually decreased productive efficiency. The businesses were actually incentivized to decrease efficiency. That's a bad thing. All right, those are the two examples. There's plenty more. Like I said, any intervention, you could make an argument for an unintended consequence, but I think that gives you two good examples. Well done on finishing microeconomics. I'll see you in macroeconomics. Bye for now.